construct, and then you don't see the structure. Like maybe you're using the induction hypothesis, and it has itself 5 hypotheses, and maybe some of them are useful to discharge some of them, but you've lost all of that. And then I'm like, actually, I'm not a big fan of those big proofs, unless they're about some lemma in the background theory that I really don't care about. But when I'm working on my own theories and I want to, present them, then I don't like that terminology. Oh, is it already 30 past?
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah. So, sorry. No, got it right. Welcome. So this is intended to be an informal discussion, but with short presentations to sort of facilitate or motivate the discussions. I did make up some slides. Actually, this is the second meeting on education. I made up some slides for that one. I think the audience for this one is almost entirely disjointed.
Maybe you.
But so for last time, I just made some slides just to sort of frame the questions and the issues for the discussion. So I'll run through those slides again, and then what we'll do then. No, Jasmine, we'll have Jasmine talk. So the idea is various among us will get up and talk about our experiences using, some of our experiences using formal methods in teaching. So we'll have Jasmine, and then Shankar, and then Cesare, and then another time I'll talk about some of my own as well. So the goal is, so we want to just have this conversation where we can start sharing expertise and resources and ideas regarding the use of formal methods in education. And one of the things I want to emphasize is that the question of using formal methods in education is a very broad one. There are a lot of things that one might mean by it. So first of all, talking about formal methods, you might have in mind interactive theorem proving, automated reasoning, either automated theorem provers, constraint solvers, or something like that, or any other kind of formal method out there. So that encompasses a number of different topics. And then who are you educating? Who are you teaching? I mean, you might be trying to educate the public at large as to the importance of formal methods and their use, or undergraduates or graduate students, or advanced researchers. So there's a whole array there. And then the question is, well, and what type of audience are you trying to reach? Mathematicians, computer scientists? Are you trying to reach logicians and type theorists? And again, I've left it open-ended, and so we'll be hearing, I think that the discussion today will include, all those topics. But given the fact that this venue is at the Isaac Newton Institute, and given that the Institute's interest and focus on mathematics, I hope we'll pay some attention to what it takes to communicate and interact with a mathematical audience. And I initially conceived of the mission of this program at the Isaac Newton Institute as trying to understand what it will take to make formal methods useful to mathematics. I think I enjoyed the panel discussion at the workshop. Tim Gowers gave a very frank assessment of what it would take to get mathematicians interested, in particular him interested. What is useful to a general mathematical audience, and what might not be. And so we're not there yet. I think we can't oversell the technology, but we're getting there. We're heading in the right direction. In discussions before the meeting among the organizers, Jay Moore made a good point that when it comes to sort of communicating the importance of formal methods or the value of formal methods to mathematicians, I mean, one thing you can try to do is try to convince mathematicians that this is a useful tool, that this will help you do mathematics better, and so on. But another thing another message that you might want to convey to a mathematical audience is that you should be interested in formal methods because they're valuable, right? And they need mathematical attention. Right? So formal methods are gaining an increased foothold in industry and verifying the hardware, software, compilers. We've heard Graham tell us about formal methods in the financial markets. These are very important social uses. They're very important applications, and they rely on a mathematical understanding, and not just on a general logical understanding, but on results from analysis and algebra, symbolic computation, real algebraic, algebraic geometry, and so on. And so another message we can think to convey to a mathematical audience is there's good mathematics here. Right? There are lots of interesting and important mathematical problems that you might want to take an interest in. So I think we should try to think about that as well. And also, I mean, it came up in the last discussion that even what it means to incorporate formal methods in teaching. I mean, you can have classes that are entirely about formal method. You can have a class on automated reasoning or a class on interactive theorem proving and so on. But you can also think about ways of incorporating formal methods just in a regular classroom. You might be teaching a course on discrete mathematics, and maybe there are exercises that you can do where some kind of tool can be put to good use. So there's lots of different topics sort of rolled into this one discussion. And I think concretely what we should talk about today is how we can promote the cause of using formal methods in education. And so what will it take? Well, I mean, good teaching materials, textbooks. It's especially nice when they're freely available, when they're open source or open access. We need to have proofs and tools that are configured for classroom use and adapted. And again, the knowledge and experiences that other people have had teaching, we need to make accessible to others. One thing that also came up in the previous discussion is that there were a number of people in the room, young people, who would say things like, well, next year I'll be teaching an introductory, course in just introduction to mathematics, and I'd really love to use theorem provers somehow if I could find some way of working it in. So we really need to. So those of us who have taught and used these tools before need to report on what we've found useful, what works, what doesn't work. I think it's really important for us to start sharing that information, gathering and sharing that information. Okay. And so in terms of what kinds of resources will support formal methods in education, well, I mean, there's, of course, reference manuals and tutorials, and I'm not going to start listing them because every theorem prover out there has some kind of document, maybe for better or for worse, good or bad, right? But there's, so every system out there has some kind of documentation associated with it. As far as teaching to computer science students, here are some of the sources that I know of. These are some of the sort of, well, it's kind of funny to call them classics, but they're sort of modern classics. So I mean, so Benjamin Pierce and others, the Software Foundations. So there's an online course on sort of reasoning about programs. Adam Chipala has a book called Certified Programming with Dependent Types, which has been very influential, and he's working on another one called Formal Reasoning about Programs. The nice thing is that they're both he keeps them. So even though this one is still in progress, it's all the material is online, and CPDT is also available online. I guess Jasmine will say something about complete semantics. It's a very nice course, and again, freely available. You can download the textbook. Oh, by the way, all this material I'll put up on the webpage, so you'll have.
But it's definitely not exhaustive, right? So
Oh, this is not meant to be exhaustive.
Yeah, I was going to add Aaron Stump's book that ACM just published, right?
Okay, I don't know it. So
It
tell me
uses
about it.
sort of like Bentley Pierce territory, but using Under instead of Top.
Okay, good. Send me your reference. Yeah, if
Yeah.
you know of other ones, I'm
I had
happy
a
to just
full page
so far.
advert in the
This is
last
good.
CACM.
What?
There was a full page advert in the last CACM before last.
Good.
So obviously advertised in CACM.
yeah, I have two more, but I'll mention one of them and I'll send you the other.
I mean, maybe at some point it would be nice if somebody would just maintain a web page and navigate. But if this is, insofar as this is the start of a list, I'm happy to start adding references here. Yeah, I mean, here are a few more. So if there's an teaching, so specifically more type theory, but there are a few courses out there. And then Jay was at the last meeting, and he pointed out a course that he's developed and used to teach students. And so it's, yeah, you can find it online. So the class uses the Moore method, and this Moore is no connection to that Moore. So was it University of Chicago? Was that where
No, he talked of the University of Texas.
And Tex,
Yeah.
Moore was at
So
the.
R.L. Moore was, actually,
What's the first name?
R.L. Moore, I
R.L.
assume it's
Moore,
Robert
okay.
Lee. He was considered a very.
Yeah. But it's yeah, you're on here. But it's a course where basically students come in and you have them learn by themselves. You lay out the issues, you ask them questions, you have them work together. You know, the instructor has to be very careful to guide discussion, prevent things going off on tangents, and push students in the right direction. But it's kind of a self-directed learning. Well, it's an interesting style of teaching that they adopted. But I think also, you know, one topic that's sort of near and dear to my heart is how can we figure out how to use formal tools to teach just not computer scientists, not logicians, but just starting undergraduates, you know, who need to learn mathematical reasoning. So here are two sources that I know of, and if there's time at the end, you know, I'll be the last speaker today. I'll talk about experiences that I've had teaching a course with Rob and Flores, right there, a course called Logic and Proof, and the materials are all online. And Daniel Mellon has an introduction to, so it's an introduction to mathematical proof called How to Prove It. That's all used in a lot of sort of introductory math course. He's developed a little proof teaching app called Proof Design. I've never experimented with it, but it's there. Yeah.
Pete Manolius has also had some experience teaching undergrads proof with her. You have it?
I don't. No. So
Okay,
good.
yeah.
Send me.
So,
I'll add it to
So
it.
he has this thing called the ACN2 Sinan, which he uses, and his experience is quite interesting.
Yeah. So the resource.
What was the thing, Jake? You remember Jake?
Jake,
Yes,
yeah.
the natural deduction
Yeah.
system.
Yeah, with boxes and things.
Oh, there's an idea as well in Denmark, Villadsen.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll have to
Yeah,
download
Yeah. So
it.
okay. So,
It would
so
be really good to have a you know, a
some kind of
definitive,
repository.
yeah, where people can add these things. It's quite hard to find sometimes.
Okay, but so let's start with Jasmine telling us. Well, I guess are there any other questions or comments before?
Oh, it's the wrong blue. Oh gosh. Look at this. It's a string.
Clash.
Well,
My machine is the same blue.
So, Jeremy, is that your machine?
this is my.
Can I just email you my slides then?
Yeah.
Maybe I have a question, maybe really.
Oh yeah.
So number of people have mentioned about Tim Bauer's comments.
Yeah.
You know, on why their approvers can be useful or not useful for mathematicians. But I could not find his talk anywhere, so is it possible for somebody to?
It was the panel discussion.
Oh, yeah,
Or maybe
actually,
it has
so
some-
Jeremy has a nice summary of it.
Who?
Jeremy's email
I
has a
see.
nice summary of it. I was planning to actually put that
Okay.
into the panel discussion.
So there should be some video.
This video, but
I haven't seen
I
that.
think the summary is clearer than.
That's good.
All right, so I've taught two courses so far in my life with proof assistants, and first time was Isabel Hall, and was taught in a very top-down fashion, and then Cock in a more bottom-up fashion. I explain what I mean exactly by this, but I think it's quite relevant in some sense with the discussion. So in 2015, I followed Tobias's new book. So Tobias and Gavin Klein had written this book about concrete semantics. It was based on the course that was taught in Munich. It has evolved from many years of teaching there. And in Saarbrücken, I thought, okay, at some point I'll have to teach a bit, otherwise nobody will hire me as a professor. So I decided to follow that book. And well, as the name suggests, it's mostly about semantics, but also about Isabel Hall. So maybe it's like 1/4 Isabel, then 3/4 semantics, roughly. It's in two parts, but I mean, Tobias liked to say that it's they had an expression was, what is it? He said it's this semantics dog that, what is it called? Wigs or waves or whatever. It's proof assistant tail and not the other way around. But I'm not good at English idioms. Yes, you want.
Just in case we have a mixed audience, you should say, when you say semantics, you mean of programming languages.
Of programming languages.
Not as it were semantics of natural languages. or
Yes,
anything
very
else.
good. Thank you. And concrete has no strict meaning here. It just means that it's I think it's based on like solid foundation with real examples and real wide languages, like little programming languages, but they're real and not abstract and vague or something like that. Right, so this was in Saarbrücken. So standard course, it goes for 3 or 4 months, and it's 1 course a week, 1 lecture. Always confused between class, lecture, and course. 1 lecture a week plus 1 exercise session, and there were 25 students at the beginning and 18 that stayed until the end, took the exam. And overall it was a really good bunch. I think I had to give the top score to 1/3 of the class. I just didn't know what else to do. I mean, I was very lucky. But many of them were TAs, and there was a bunch of people hang together and they're TAs in various courses. And then if one of them decides to take a course, then they all take the course. So I had the whole bunch of them that were like just really good, and now many of them have started PhDs and so on.
Which year was that?
Right, so it's an advanced bachelor level course. So it's like 3rd year bachelor course mostly. Anybody can take it, but that's the typical profile. So undergraduates, but optional undergraduate course. There was already a real semantics course at university, and there was also a COC course. So this was like completely optional and redundant in some sense, but people who liked COC, then they jumped on this course. And again, this is a good filter. I always see logic is a good filter. It's like the less good students, they stay away, and then you end up with good students. You don't end up with tons of good students, but you end up with good students.
I mean, the reason I ask is that we seem to have developed some kind of bizarre pipeline where these guys come to us, do a master's, and then go back to Saarbrücken. So I'd be interested to know who it was in 2015.
You're
probably talk some of them the next year.
Yeah, you probably know Katrina Stark, among others.
Yes,
She was part of that pipeline. Yeah, I've met many of them. It's like they're all going to Cambridge or something. Yeah, I had terrible students. Right. So I changed the ratio a little bit because I'm not a semantics expert. So I had the smaller dog and the bigger tail. So I had 1/3 maybe Isabelle and 2/3 semantics. I also had a guest lecture by Andreas Lochbieler. So for those who don't know him, he's like the Xavier Leroy of Isabelle. So he formalizes Java with threads in Isabelle, verified compiler, memory model, and so on. And he really integrated it into the course. Like, oh, this is the kind of stuff you've been doing. Well, you can generalize it to this case, and this is how it works on a real programming language. It was, I think, a very, very nice lecture. And then, homework counted. I wanted people to really do the homework and get points for it, but I often had bonus points. So that's how, I told them to prove things like some silly formulas that are quite horrible to prove, but I put it as optional, and then they would develop their ISAR skills by doing it. For example, the sum of I square from 1 to n. Some people had like ISAR proofs that were long like this. Actually possible to do it in 4 lines once you know what to do, and so on. Right, so at some point around week 4, things got a bit difficult, and then I saw that some students were struggling. So I wrote to the 5 students who, were like having most trouble. I had this intuition that they were good enough to manage until the end, but they needed a bit of help at the right point. And I said, come to me, and I will spend a couple of hours with you, and it's the first time I teach this course, and maybe I'm not explaining well enough, but I think you're capable. And then one of them was like, I always have 1.0 and everything, and this course might be more difficult than others, so I will just quit, and I'll go in some other course where I can have the top score without working too much. I was like, okay, fair enough. So in the end, you have different considerations, different motivations. In the end, there was only one who did it. He came to me, and we did spend 3 hours together. And he just needed a couple of hints and was a bit confused about certain things. But this is normal when you start using a proof assistant. And then after that, he survived until the end. So I was very happy you know, to see that proof assistants are not, I mean, something we were starting to know, but I mean, it's not rocket science. I mean, you can take a student, an A or B or C student, and at the end of the term, they will pass and get A, B, or C, also in the course about proof assistance. At least that was my experience. And then for weeks 9 and 10, we had the student project, and where I just told them, formalize whatever you want, develop whatever you want. And there were 3 or 4 projects, only 2 or 3 that were in the scope of like 1,000, 1,500 lines. And one of them was a proof of Hall's marriage theorem and some properties of Latin squares that you can derive from this. It turns out that just this part here was a CTP 2013 paper, I think, by Tobias Nipko and Dong Cheng, I forgot his family name. And he even was my office mate, gosh. Yeah, I will find it at some point. So basically in 1 week, he started from scratch. This guy had never used Isabelle before, or Coq, or any proof assistant. And you know what I told those guys were like, okay, this is the ISAR language. This is how it works. You know these have and hence and thus and show, by, you know, a bit like Mizar. This is auto, the proof method. This is simplifier. This is a blast. This is sledgehammer, and this is the induct proof method. And here are some heuristics on which variable to do induction on and which principle to use, induction principle to use. I mean, what we taught in the first few weeks basically amounted to that. And then, you know, they can prove things. They can really prove things. They can start with the textbook and formalize things, at least the best of them. And this is, I mean, something Larry had discovered around 2010 that, I mean, when he taught Isabelle then, it was very different from 10 years before, when you have to describe all these very low-level tactics and so on before you can do anything. So I thought this was a huge success. I mean, so this gentleman now is a PhD student in Amsterdam, and it was actually there were several students that I considered as PhD students, and I was able to work with 4 of these students as either interns or as master's student and so on, and one of them I was able to recruit, and actually was the best, I can reveal this much. He had the highest score and was just the best. And didn't know CAC before, so he was able to just pick all of this up. So many students knew CAC, maybe more than half of them, thanks to Gert Smolka's course Introduction to Computational Logic. And it's funny because, you know, I thought they would, and I'm a bit joking here, but I thought they would see Isabelle and see, oh, everything is easier in Isabelle. Most of them to this day prefer Coq to Isabelle, right? So Gert did a better job, but maybe it's survival bias, right? So people didn't like Coq, they didn't take my course because they thought it would be more of the same. But I must really admit, and I did not expect this, but most of them still to this day really love dependent types, really love Coq. And there is no way, and even like, Johannes Schulze is no longer there, but he moved to Lean and he doesn't want to come back to Isabelle, right? So there's something about those dependent types that, I mean, maybe
causes dependency?
Yes, that's right. It's like crack cocaine, really, isn't it?
But I mean, to me, this was very revealing. But they love sledgehammer. So one of them said, oh, I want to do a PhD with you and I want to do sledgehammer in Coq. But then I moved to Amsterdam, it's like, I want to stay in Saarbrücken. So it didn't work. It was very top down. We never taught them the syntax of types or syntax of terms. We said, if you want to write 1 + 1 = 2, you write 1 + 1 = 2. And you saw in week 3, an optional exercise was the sum of all squares from 1 to n. In week 3, most of them could prove this and get bonus points. Right? I mean, try to do that in a course about type theory in Coq. I mean, it's not going to work. But then the students were actually not entirely happy in the beginning because they expected bottom up. And I never told them, oh, my course is going to be very different from Gert Smolka's and going to be top down. So they were like, oh, you know, Coq is much nicer because you have introduction and elimination rules. And I was like, well, Isabelle too, is just that I haven't taught you in the first 3 weeks yet. I mean, so they assumed that Isabelle was a completely different system, even in those aspects where it's similar. Or, oh, Coq, you can, you know, you have a proof state and you can interact with it with like apply commands and so on. And I was like, yeah, Isabelle too. It's just that we're putting more focus on ISAR. And then at some point, after 5 weeks, I gave them an optional lecture on the syntax and semantics of Hull, and then they were happy. And I also pointed them to the introduction in elimination rules in chapter 5 of the old tutorial, and then that was enough to. And also they got better at Isabel, but I mean, I was surprised. They really thought, you know, they knew already Coq, and then they had to start from scratch. And of course it was hard to start, but I thought it would be obvious to them that it's hard to start a new system, but they thought it would be easy. And were disappointed that, and I was happy about the results I was seeing. They were solving the exercises. So I was like, what's the problem? You guys are doing great. So there was a bit this disconnect in the beginning, which I thought was funny.
So they wouldn't know the syntax and semantics of simple type theory for
Exactly.
Gerrit's lecture.
Yeah, Gert didn't. I mean, unlike say Femke van Vamsdonk or the others, he didn't go with these fragments. I don't think he said, "Oh, this is simple type theory," and so I think he went straight to the calculus of constructions. Introduced it still. I mean, he introduced the inductive things after some other things, but he didn't say this is simple type theory.
Because, for example, the way Chad was teaching it in Prague this year was that he first gave it for the whole way, which is like the simpler case, and then.
Yeah, it wasn't done like this. I attended many of Gert's courses. I mean, it was a way for me to learn Coq.
When you say top down or bottom up, I think there are two things that might be conflicting. One is sort of how formal, but the other, so when it came to writing theorem proving in lean, right? Before we started, I had the same type of, agonizing about do you go top down or bottom up? And there's the model of sort of software foundations, for example, which just starts with some high level examples. And my concern about that, I mean, I'm personally uncomfortable reading something like that because I know how to do those examples, but I still don't feel like I know how it works, and I worry that the knowledge is brittle.
Yeah.
Whereas when you go bottom up, so we decided to go the bottom up route.
I don't have the ultimate answer here, and actually you'll see. Of course, I thought bottom up afterwards. And I will mention the advantages of bottom-up when I come to it, and on the last slide I will come back to this. But it's true, I mean, especially in the university context, I would say academic context, I mean, bottom-up does feel more like how universities should be. I mean, these are not babies. I mean, if you cannot prove this after 3 weeks, it doesn't matter as long as you can prove it after 16, right? Students should have the patience. I mean, they shouldn't be motivated. You shouldn't have to motivate them every week and so on. At the same time, I don't think there's great harm in, I mean, this definitely is motivating because you're doing, already in the beginning, you're doing real stuff in some sense. So there's definitely some tension there. Yeah, I don't have the ultimate answer.
So what's the most complicated proof they do in the course?
In the entire course, let me think. Often they have to extend, they will extend a while language with a new construct, and then they have to adapt a whole series of proofs. So I'll tell you the most complicated proof we don't do. There's a compiler at some point for this while language to a stack machine, and it's like 500 lines long or something. And I cannot go through all that proof. I mean, I briefly explain it to them and so on, but it gets a bit too hairy for some of the lemmas, so we don't expect students to be able to write that kind of proof. I mean, even I would find it hard. And probably Tobias and Gerwin optimized it so that it fits in 500 lines, but they have a lot of experience writing that kind of proofs. So it's just to show, okay, you could do this, but... and also there were 1 or 2 exercises where I decided, okay, let's not do them formally, they're too difficult. So things with concurrency. So I said, express the property without proving it. And I took a standard textbook by Andrews, not Peter Andrews, but some other Andrews about concurrency and so on. And there's something called the Reynolds criterion. And I think it's John Reynolds actually, or the utmost ones property. And then I said, formalize this and so on, but without the proofs. And the amazing thing is one of the students say, hey, there's a problem with this property. If this and that happens and so on. And then I looked up the errata, and there was a 2-page discussion about the property and how it was flawed, and the author was pretending it was not really flawed. And the funny thing is I had learned concurrency from that book, and nobody had told me that this property was wrong, and I also believed it was right. And it was one of my students who discovered that it was wrong. And basically there were 1 or 2 times where we did things informally, and always ended in total chaos and disaster, which actually was great because it, in a kind of meta way, because then the students, you see, we really need formal proofs for this stuff, because even the instructors are completely confused, and even the authors of those books. So the meta point was right in the end. There was one student who really was grumpy and not happy, and this is really fascinating. He left after 3 or 4 weeks. He was good at cock, and he just absolutely hated Isabel. And I
preventing beast.
yeah, that's a beautiful one. It's not a proof assistant; it's a proof preventing beast. Tim Goldberg would probably. Hey, you have to read this.
Beast
info.
didn't say he didn't like the clothes you were wearing.
So actually, I showed this comment in the following course. I was like, okay, there's one of you who's not happy, and we discussed it. And you know that the student had the highest score and so on, had never done any cock. He's like, I don't understand what's the problem. You know, Isabel is easy to use and it's all nice and so on, and he couldn't relate to any of this.
But is the implication that the student had worked with cock? I mean, is the implication that the things that were difficult here, did the student have the impression that somehow it would be easier with cock? I mean, that's
Well,
surprising to me.
the first thing is, I mean, we shouldn't spend too much time on this student because he is known for having a very strong personality, picking up fights. So I mean, actually, I mean, I'm still on friendly terms with him. I mean, sometimes I met him on campus and so on. I was like, okay, that's your opinion. And I answered back, you know, you're a very smart guy. I mean, I'm sure you can, like, what is it called, close your nose and manage this Isabel stuff no matter how horrible it is. There are lots of people who are less smart than you and they manage, right? So I thought I would challenge him like that, but he ended up
So
leaving.
maybe it's more a commentary on the kind of problems you chose to put them through rather than.
Well, at first what I did is in 3 weeks I tried to teach them Isabel, and I think I succeeded before we go on with the concrete semantic stuff. But during those 3 weeks, he was proving things that we knew how to prove in Cox. He was learning nothing. He wanted to get to the concrete semantics part, but I was like, I need to teach you Isabel first. And then he didn't want to learn Isabel either, so right, I mean, that didn't help. So, but I mean, this was an isolated case, and I'm citing it because it's kind of interesting and anecdotically, but I could teach a course 20 years in a row, and maybe there's just one guy like that, right?
So he knew Coq already?
Yeah, he was a TA in COC. That's
Right. But
So,
that's to do with potentially your top-down approach.
yeah,
right?
that was part of the thing. I think it's part of the, everybody who had used COC before had problems with the top-down approach, especially that I hadn't said when I started that it would be top-down. So, I mean, as soon as we had the discussion and so on, things started getting much better. And I mean, they were not really bad. I mean, at the end, the evaluations were very good and so on. I mean, people, even those with COC background, seem to have liked or loved the course. I'm putting a bit too much focus on this just because that was a big revelation to me.
I'm just gonna keep an eye on the timing.
Yeah, sorry. So, 2 more minutes. So this is kind of things. Basically, in the evaluation, the end, they didn't like Isabel, and also workload was uneven and so on. But those are minor things. Computer too slow to do sledgehammer, but they really like sledgehammer and they dream of having a sledgehammer for COC, basically. And they like us, people teaching and doing the exercises. And this is, I already showed this, the features that they liked and that they disliked in Isabel. Lots of things that COC does better are on the right-hand side. For example, the apply style explorative. Oh gosh, so yeah, I really have only 2 minutes. I don't have much to say about the second part, that's a good thing. So now I was in Amsterdam and they've been teaching COC for some years. I thought that's a good opportunity for me to have to learn COC better if I'm going to teach it. And I just took Femke van Hamsdonck's notes and slides and so on, just like I'd done with Tobias before, Tobias's and Gavin's. And the course was just more compressed, but was roughly equivalent in number of hours, and was about twice as few, I mean, half the number of students in the course. And there it's more about, you have logic, lambda calculi, and COC, and you keep on going back and forth, and you keep on talking about the Curry, Howard, de Bruijn correspondence. When the Netherlands, we have to mention de Bruijn there. And since we had all these notations, I kept telling the students, I'm going to confuse you and your goal is to fight back. I mean, your goal is not to let yourself be confused by the fact that we switch between three notations all the time. And I kept on repeating that. And there were a couple of advanced lectures, more like on meta theory stuff. But mostly meta theory was mentioned all the time, but didn't really prove anything. So it's more like, okay, this is decidable, this is not, and so on. And this is why Coq does this automatically, whereas this you have to provide yourself. And yeah, there were a couple of comments, but I think there's not much here that's important. So my last slide is, yeah, so I find personally the top-down approach more motivating. That's more my style of doing things, because I like to do actual proving, not just contemplate the meta theory. But the bottom-up, yeah, it's more academic, and I learned more teaching the Coq course than the Isabel, because I had to really understand the things I was doing. And I think that, I mean, students, it's hard to say, but they seem to have liked it, and nobody complained that it wasn't top-down in some sense. I also like to have larger groups, but that's often like that. And I already mentioned the, I mean, people who have known Coq before, they wanted a hammer. They went through their old Coq formalizations, they read them in Isabel, and then discovered that everything that was very difficult before was just sledgehammer, 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 and actually that they have wasted a lot of time by not having automation. Yeah, that's pretty much.
I have a big question.
Yeah.
Which is that, you know, if you follow Jeremy's point about teaching other stuff using formal methods.
Yes.
I mean, it looks like this is too much overhead. You're just teaching formal methods with formal methods, and you know, there seems to be.
Well, concrete semantics was 1/3, 2/3, right? And I could have done it 1/4, 3/4.
1/3 is, I think, heavy overhead.
Yeah, but it pays off. I mean, because they really.
It would pay off if they did other courses. That,
Oh, it pays off, I think, already for semantics, because these proofs on paper are horrible. I think they really, at least, I mean, I'm not saying it's like that in all areas. You should choose the areas carefully, but I think for semantics.
Take this compiler. I mean, supposing you're in a compiler course.
Yeah.
With formal methods. I think, you know, you have to arrange it in such a way that it's like, you know, 5% overhead or 10% overhead.
Okay, yeah, well, that's true. But I mean, it's my style. I mean, I prefer students to learn less, but to learn it well.
No, I do too. Actually, I teach them very, very, very little. But you know, it's still stuff where they are doing the subject matter rather than you know, the kind of boilerplate stuff.
Right. Yeah, I guess you need many courses to amortize it, ideally. But, I mean, my main motivation was to teach Isabel stuff, but then I also learned the semantics as I went, and I mean, I'd seen some of it before, but I had to master it more. So yeah, it's a weird hybrid, I would say, 1/3, 2/3, and so on. And I tried to attract two groups of people, and it kind of succeeded, but some were there for semantics, and some were there for theorem proving. And there was a bit of tension there, you could say.
Actually, that was another bit of experience. As I think I mentioned it before, some people just get the theorem proving, others never get it. They just cannot understand.
Yeah, my experience is they all got it enough, at least the 18 who stayed until the end. I mean, they all...
but the variation in skill is much more dramatic than.
Oh, for other activities, yeah, for sure.
So I've taught, you know, conventional courses on programming language semantics and to very clever undergraduates, but nevertheless, whilst they're very clever, the thing that they always had great difficulty with was properly proving things by induction, finding induction hypotheses, and that, you know, machine assistance, I think, the reason people like it, I think, is that it assures them that they really have proved something, because if they're doing it pencil and paper, they can very easily think that they proved something and they haven't really done it.
And you see it in Isabel, that was one thing where they really fought against. You often, if you don't set up things properly, you end up with unprovable goals. right? You have to thread in all the properties that talk about the variable in which you do induction, and then when you apply the induction hypothesis, you have to discharge all the assumptions and so on. And these are two things I just mentioned that we do very sloppily on paper, and we're kind of lucky that it stands the test of formalization in the end when it does. And they suffered quite a bit there, and I suffered too. I mean, when we reason about the transitive closure and things like that, things get very messy very quickly. But at the same time, it's good because I mean, you see, these are actual difficulties with induction. I think we're reaching the end.
Wait, are you done? I don't want
Yes, I am.
to pull you off this.
No, I was offering to leave now.
Shai, did you?
Email it.
Jasmine, did you get any mathematicians or was this all very
No,
small
it was all.
computer science?
Well, I had one computational linguistics guy who had a bachelor's in mathematics. That was Alex Benkamp. That was the guy who did best.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh. Yeah, it would be interesting, like because the bias is already for computer.
But it's interesting because this guy took computational linguistics because he thought I like computer science, I like mathematics, and then he hated computational linguistics. I mean, he had very good scores, but he hated it. And then he discovered theorem proving. He's like, wow, this is the combination that interests me. And now he switched over.
So I should not be saying anything here. I don't know two things about education. I don't do education very much at all. It's been a long while since I lectured on just about anything educational. But I did collect some input from others, so I'll be talking about that. Okay, it's not my stuff. But I do have lots of views on education since it's a purely theoretical pursuit for me. So I do love the Moore method, and I'm really wary of using technology in education. I have to say the Moore method relies a lot on students actually following proofs, finding mistakes, finding stylistic improvements, and things like that. And for me, when I'm teaching those kinds of things, I really want the students to do the theorem proving themselves, figure out their own proof styles, the independence of the sheer liberation of just chalk on board is what I value in teaching. But others tell me that they've taught using theorem provers and they've had tremendous that they see improvements in their reviews and things like that when they use theorem provers, and it could be that they are better skilled than I am at doing it, and maybe their reviews are a reflection of their skill. But I do sympathize with one point which I think they do convey to me, which is that the students, what they appreciate about using a theorem prover is that they can make mistakes in private. And they can do it with the full confidence that they will be caught. Okay, so this actually, I think, helps them think a little more creatively. And when I have students present at the blackboard, it is a somewhat nerve-wracking experience for many of them to do this. Eventually, they warm up to it. They understand that it's part of the give and take, and shyness goes away. But I think if you're making these mistakes in private, there is some value to it. But I fear that students who are doing this stuff in private, they may just be gaming the thing. They may just be getting to QED somehow or the other without actually seeking out deep and elegant arguments. Okay, so I sent out a query. I think I sent it on the PBS mailing list and got 5 responses. They're a little PBS biased, not too much. But the other part I'll talk about is the summer school on formal techniques that have been running for about 7 years now. Okay, so we get about 70 to 80 students each year, and I get feedback from them. I don't actually do a lot of teaching in that school, but the feedback is about the general idea of teaching people how to use formal tools. So first I'll go through the email responses. So this is from Mike Gordon, who taught a hardware-software verification course for MS students using Hall 98 in the Oregon Graduate Institute. And he did this, I think it was a long time ago. It was at least 15 years ago. And So for him, it was a new experience teaching in this, in an American setting. He had to actually merge two courses that he teaches in Cambridge into one course, and he still had time left over for guest lectures and so on. So it looks like at Cambridge you, I guess, collect tuition from the students, but you shortchange them in terms of the number of courses you teach them and number of lectures you give them. But he couldn't do that in Oregon Graduate Institute. But he said the students were really enthusiastic. All that worked well. For him, it was a lot of work. It took about 10 weeks of almost all the time was taken in preparations. And he says that it was great to have external lecturers. That saved him work and was popular with the students. But he doesn't recall having any difficulty with the material or with the use of Hall 98 and that. Okay, so in this, he says there's a thing that I left out, in which he says that maybe that because I chose very simple examples, none of the difficulties showed up. So that might also be something that perhaps Jasmine was giving them exercises perhaps that were too difficult, and maybe the simple exercises are the ones that actually work. So the summary is that the students really did get a lot out of it. Okay, so that's one experience. The other is actually quite a long response from Perry Alexander, who has a lot of experience doing this. I mean, this guy is dedicated, sincere. He really tries to make this stuff work, and he makes some important points on this. So he's been teaching this at both Cincinnati and then later at KU for over a total of 23 years. So he's been teaching COC more recently, PBS the last 20 years, so Isabel for a year and so on. So he started using this Software Foundations book. So I'm grateful to have the tool support. They seem to enjoy the material. So he's one of the people who actually gets positive feedback from using tools, and I think he does it really well. So
Guess what U stands for, but I don't know what K stands for.
Kansas.
Thank
knows.
you.
Yeah.
Guys also welcome.
Yeah. The student feedback almost all quite positive. Never heard complaints about the tools. I suspect it's because they require virtually no installation and run everywhere. Then he's taught a bunch of other classes as well. So this is decision procedures and model checking. I think this is a MS PhD course. So this he uses PBS SAL and Yikes for that. Then he taught these things. So he can't decide which he prefers, the Pierce's book or Winskill's book. Sorry for the missing apostrophes there. This is again something where that book uses COG directly, and Winskill's book is just a standard traditional textbook. So I mean, I think what he means out here is that doing proofs itself slows the class down.
It's kind of a bizarre comparison. I mean, the content of the two books is not exactly comparable.
Yeah, that's right. So he teaches a kind of EECS course on software engineering using Z, and he says that went really well, that people prefer actually writing formulas to drawing diagrams. His teaching evaluations improved. But the last point he makes is the best things we could do as a formal verification community would be replacing the discrete math course that CS students take with a similar course that uses verification tools. And I think this is a perfectly reasonable recommendation. I think if we can't do this, then forget about compilers, operating system, hardware, databases, machine learning, etc. This is something that we should do. And actually, I think we should be more ambitious than this. We should do discrete math at the high school level using theorem proving. Okay. So that's the recommendation that and I think actually students would benefit a lot from it. I think that if you don't catch people at the high school stage, they develop kind of dogmas about the subject. So I remember when my oldest was actually taught Java in high school. It wasn't done badly. The textbook was perfectly good, but just the battering your head against a brick wall as you do with compiling, debugging programs and so on. People think that's what computer scientists do. That's not the career they want. And actually, I think typically the people who take this don't really end up doing computer science with any enthusiasm. Okay, so this is from Wim Hessling. So he's done a lot of things. So he taught with NQ-Thumb. I don't know what he taught with NQ-Thumb, but it wasn't easy going. So one of his students said, I don't know why he's relying on the students. Actually, he's a very experienced PBS user himself. So the lot of people actually teach model checking using spin and have positive experiences with it. I'll say more about this also. So but I think this is a good idea to have a course like this, because one of the problems you have when you teach something like Jasmine's course is that you get this kind of bias, like they learn cork first and they think the world in terms of things, cork and so on, and this is not a good idea. People should understand that there's a whole spectrum of these tools and that they need to think about it the way a surgeon thinks about the surgical instruments. Okay, so that's the... Stefan Loy said he teaches spin, opal, and prism. By the way, these are really good tools. I mean, these are very, very, especially opal and prism are extremely polished, and students love to not only learn this stuff, they love to use it. And I think these are things that they could be using quite heavily in their own research also. Extremely, they're more polished than industrial software. Subhash Shankar actually said he plans to teach an undergraduate because he's not done that yet, but he's been teaching a PhD introduction to formal methods with positive feedback. And again, he too would like to see more logic heavy courses in the ACM curriculum. Is anybody involved in the ACM curriculum? Anybody with any impact on the ACM curriculum?
There's nothing in the ACM curriculum about formal methods.
There isn't.
Or
Yeah.
logic.
Yeah, there isn't. Yeah. Is there any mechanism to influence it?
Well, they were seeking comments about 6 months ago. I don't know if they're still open.
6 months ago?
Or 3 months ago? Okay.
Oh, I missed that.
Yeah, they were.
But maybe we should, make a coordinator attempt to
Yeah,
have some impact on
community
it.
definitely should, but that's about computer science, so.
Yeah. So I think there's something, but again, if we do this and we're not ready with course material and lecturers and things like that, it'll crash and burn. So be careful what you wish for.
Yeah.
So this is something that. This is a summer school on formal techniques. So as I mentioned, it started with this idea of we had a workshop on usable verification that Lenore Zook funded. And we had this workshop in Microsoft Redmond. I don't think, Chesri, were you there at the Redmond workshop? Okay. Yeah, in fact, I don't think any of you were there. But it was a fantastic meeting, and lots of great ideas came out of it. And one of these was that students need to have more confidence in actually knowing that these are excellent research instruments, and that they should be using model checkers, SAT solvers, SMT solvers, rewrite engines, cryptographic protocol verifiers, and interactive proof assistants, all of these things in their own research. Because a lot of times students don't know about this stuff. If they know about it, they're afraid to use it. Okay, and if they have trouble installing it, they just get discouraged very easily. If I were a student, I would be the same way. And so, part of this exercise is actually bringing the students, making sure that the developers are there to help them install the software. Actually, the biggest part of what they achieve in the school is actually installing some of the software. You can't imagine how difficult that has been. And then they actually get to do a few hello world exercises and go away with the confidence that they know how to get going with the software, that they can use it at a reasonably not an expert level, but definitely an intermediate level by the time they get out of the school. And remember, it's just a 5-day school, and it's got 2 lectures and 2 labs by each lecturer. But that's actually plenty for them to develop this expertise. We usually teach 5 different things, so that I won't teach them 2 interactive proof assistants at a time, just so that they don't get confused. But we've had, for example, Gerwin Klein actually did the concrete semantics with Isabel. These were really nice lectures. We had John Harrison do Hall Light, and again, the students were thrilled to have somebody of John's stature to teach them this stuff. We've had Leonardo over the years talk about SMT solvers. Clark Barrett talked about SMT solvers. I mean, we've had a stellar group of lectures. We had Prism with Marta Kwiatkowska, Kim Larson did UPAL. So with this is a good resource. If you go to the web pages, you'll find their lectures, you'll find the directions to the tools that they taught and so on are there. So having the web pages has been a perfectly good thing. The first time we taught it, a lot of students complained that they come from universities where there's no logic course whatsoever. So I added a one-day kind of refresher thing on logic that they gets them all kind of on the same page. So that usually helps. So they learn things like what is a sequent, what is a sequent calculus, what is natural deduction. They learn a little bit of type theory as well. They learn things like interpolation, SAT solving, SMT solving, all in this one-day lecture. It kind of goes by a little quickly, but it's enough to kind of make them understand the concepts better when they see them for the second or third time. So that's the actually sum total of the teaching that I do is teaching that one day a year. So this is the feedback. Actually, there's some text that they provide as well. So so these are the numbers. I give them in two different formats. This is from 2016. So typically the quality of the lectures and labs was either good or very good. The organization, I don't do any organization. I have no idea why they said they like it. It's complete chaos. Okay? But they don't seem too unhappy with the lack of organization. This is the important thing, actually, for a lot of people. I mean, a lot of things about this shocked me. First of all, it shocked me that 70 to 80 people would show up. I expected 30 to 35 people. Okay. I mean, there's a lot of people doing formal methods in the US, a lot of students who are interested in formal methods. And I mean, I don't necessarily seek out students who are actively pursuing research in formal methods. I want people doing other stuff to show up and learn a bit of formal methods. But it's surprising how much interest there is, but it's surprising how much of the information presented there is new to them. Okay, that means there's a real gap in these universities in terms of their education. And it might be hard for the Europeans in the room to understand this. Okay, but this stuff is just not taught in a US graduate school curriculum. It's just not there. Okay, so for most of them, this information is new. So the skill acquired, we just ask yes, no, so that by default everyone says yes. I wouldn't put too much store by that, but it did affect them positively to pursue a research career. This is kind of what NSF funds this are interested in. So they did, and California in May. Why would you recommend it to everyone else? So then we asked in a more refined form. And it comes out with a weighted average of 4.69 out of 5. So it's the same thing, that good, very good is the typical thing there. So the organization is 4.82. So this is a little more refined there. So again, for many of them, most of the information is new. So for many of them, they're learning this stuff for the first time. Okay, more than half the stuff is new to them. So the skills acquired will be useful, yeah, they said that, and 82% said they would influence them to pursue a research career, which is the ultimate goal. I mean, the whole point of doing this is to make sure that many more people contemplate a research career, and they think of using formal techniques as a research tool in whatever work they're doing. And so one time we had this student show up from forensics, and who knows, maybe she went away and she's applying this stuff to forensics. This is forensics, as in CSI Miami. So that's basically what I had to say. So as I said, I'm a little wary of using technology in education, but I think for research, researchers should be using this stuff completely, and they should be well equipped to use it. And this is the gap that we can discuss. Any questions? So send your students to the summer school. Okay, they really enjoy it. It's a socially great thing for them. They gain a lot of confidence by finding out that there are a lot of people in their age group that are interested in the subject, and they really benefit tremendously from it.
Shankar, is the summer school, is it accessible to students coming from mathematics without a lot of programming background, or is it really specifically for computer science?
Yeah, we've even had many undergraduates, actually. We've had, undergraduates show up for it, so it is almost entirely self-contained. You can, if you show up, with enough mathematical maturity, you will get something out of it. I didn't talk about the kind of verbal remarks. There's a lot more refined things than you see in these numbers. So, for example, last year I did teach PBS, and actually a lot of people complained that I ran the labs like a tutorial. I mean, not a lot. I mean, 2 people maybe complained that they wanted to really do the labs, be left alone, and that's actually a good thing that I should have done. I should just let them do some of the labs.
Just wanted to make a comment because Jasmine has talked about lectures in a regular curriculum and talked about all these summer schools, and I happen to have the occasion to teach in both formats, and it's striking that so I've taught mostly a course on clock and type theory at master level in Paris for 6 or 7 years, and I would say that a third of the students were complaining this course is not competitive with others because it required too much work at home, because formalizing proofs take time and it's hard and it's frustrating and so on, as opposed to the same audience going to a summer school always find it a wonderful experience.
Yeah.
It's trying that when it's part of a master course, for instance, and I don't think it's related to the fact of having a mark at the end or not. It's just because the social aspect of it.
No, the students you get are highly motivated.
Yeah,
so someone actually told me he showed up at the summer school maybe 2 years ago, and he says, whatever energy you have in this room, you need to bottle it. I mean, the students are extremely motivated. I mean, lecturers get a lot of really good questions. The labs, I mean, people sit down and finish the work. I mean, and the lecturers do a great job of actually coordinating all these things. So, the experience will not translate to something where you're teaching master students who may or may not be highly motivated. I think that the work issue is also, we need to balance it. We cannot expect them to do more than 3 hours of work per lecture or something like that, because that's what is fair. And I think we need to, that's why I think give them simple enough challenges that are able to keep their motivation
yeah, but
high.
on the other hand, formalizing things by essence is trying to find the right way of expressing something formally. You have to try things that don't work in order to grasp it, and it's better when you are in a summer school. You can try and quickly get the feedback that it's not the right way, and I think it's.
No, see, in the summer school, we're not trying to teach them anything other than how to use the theorem or how to use the model checker.
Yeah.
That's the whole point. We're not teaching them.
But from my experience, you can't even afford having like some free time for people to make experiments with the system and ask the teachers and things you cannot afford really when you're having a weekly course.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and also if you're actually trying to learn the subject matter, you're trying to learn, say compilers or something like that, having to do the proofs. It means that's time not spent learning how compilers work. So I think this would take some preparation. I think carefully writing the textbooks, carefully designing the exercises, so that they're really like 10-minute exercises. It shouldn't take an average person more than 10 minutes. Is how we would maybe gain. But also you don't need to have. To get the point of it, you don't need to do all the exercises this way. It would be enough to do select exercises, and the motivated students can go on to do more of these. So I think, I mean, for example, there's this really baby exercise called the McCarthy Painter Compiler Correctness. Okay, this is about the simplest compiler you could imagine. This is a proof that should take, about 2 minutes to do. And, you learn quite a lot from that exercise. If you do that, it should tell you, okay, a big compiler is just this thing scaled up to 100-fold or something like that. So so giving them these exercises that really get to the crux of the matter is, I think, the skill in keeping those students engaged and motivated.
Cesare, do you have slides, or are you just going to speak? Do you have
I
slides?
don't have slides, but,
But before you start, let me just ask, Tom, if I could put you on the spot, I didn't think I asked you, but have you ever taught Holly, or have you used like theorem proofs with undergraduates? So I know you've taught in Vietnam, you've taught people to use Holly. Have you used it in a classroom?
Yeah, in fact, I was going to ask if there are others who have experience in teaching proof assistance in math courses. I've taught the Foundations of Mathematics course a few times, and first time I taught it, I introduced a little bit of whole light, just at a conceptual level, but not at a programming level. And it wasn't very successful, so I didn't try again.
Okay. I mean, if there's time at the end, I'll say a few words about our experiences. Okay.
I could say we taught this year like a combination of proof assistance. Each got like 3 hours, 4 hours, and we taught it mostly at the Department of Algebra, so these are mathematicians. So I can say something.
I teach a third year course in using Isabella.
Okay, so
And stuff coming up.
a third year, and in the mathematics department, to mathematicians.
No, it's the informatics department.
Oh, yeah,
but the assignments tend to be to do with formalized mathematics as opposed to say complete semantics or anything like that. Tends to work quite well generally when they do geometry.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's at least yeah. I mean, a question I think Tom and I are facing is, can you actually use them with students in a math department?
Yeah. But we get a broad base because some come from math, some come from philosophy.
Yeah,
Whereas
okay, so they do-
Edinburgh is pretty
So they do.
diverse,
Okay.
kind of undergraduate can
Okay,
take
so you
courses
do.
from different departments.
Guess maybe if there's time at the end, you can say a little bit more about it. Cesare?
okay, so I don't have slides, but I have a lot to say. I'll keep it short. So my experience is in computer science, so I'll try to see if it's relevant to the topic here, of course. But I have to say that a lot of our experience as computer scientists might be translated almost as is to math, in my opinion. I mean, some of the issues are very similar. Also, math majors are quite computer literate nowadays, so it's not that strange to have them to use tools. I mean, in my opinion, that they're not going to react negatively necessarily. The kind of reactions they're going to have are probably going to be similar and have to do with usability of the tools, difficulty of the exercises, the time that it takes to solve them, and so on. So my experience in teaching formal methods at University of Iowa, been there for a while, revolves around essentially 2 courses. One is a logic and computer science course that I created when I went there, and it's been fairly successful in the sense it's been offered continuously, I think every year. Since then, at some point it became a requirement as an alternative for undergraduate. And another one is formal methods in software engineering. So this is really geared towards software engineers from computer science on engineering. And the way I teach it is really about using tools to help software engineers. The first one is an undergraduate level course, actually intermediate course, mostly thought for undergraduates, but graduate students can take it for credit. The second one is the other way around. It's mostly for graduate students, although advanced undergraduates can also take it for credit. And the first one, Logic in CS, is mostly a traditional course. That is, it introduces logic to CS students starting from propositional logic and first order, temporal, and modal logic. And I haven't used any tools there. And so it's a traditional course, although I'm thinking that it might be time to start using some of these tools. So I inquired, really about using Lean and so on, because for instance, instead of having to do proofs, natural deduction proofs by hand, which gets quite tedious just to have to write the whole thing, having a tool, probably customized tools that help students doing that would be helpful. And so I can't quite comment on the experience of using tools in that course because I don't have any other than, I would like to try. But one interesting thing I want to say about that, and relates to what you said, this is one of the very few courses in the United States. I can think of maybe 3 other courses total in the whole country where they teach logic and CS in a dedicated course, which is very strange because if you think about it, logic is the language of computer science, and the only kind of logic exposure the students get in the computer science program in this discrete math course. They learn a little bit about propositional logic and maybe about what they call predicate calculus there. So it's kind of strange that we're not doing this. The ACM curriculum doesn't talk about logic at all, or formal methods in general for that matter. I think it's really time to change this. So, we are at the point where, as a community, we can offer tools and programs that might be successful. And I think it's really time in CS for the community to push towards moving more towards logic because, well, again, it's the foundations, and how can you do the rest of the stuff if you don't have it? The fact that you get so many students for which this stuff is new is symptomatic of the situation, that it's just not done. Now, the funny thing is that, I don't know what the experience here is that there's not a lot of logic going on in math departments either in the United States. For instance, at Iowa, they don't teach logic anymore. They used to have a course in for sort of logic and the standard curriculum with soundness, completeness, and then incompleteness, get those incompleteness. They don't have this anymore. So this is kind of surprising. Of course, there are programs, logic programs in a number of distinguished universities where normally they don't do this. So it's kind of going to be hard to teach to introduce formal methods in math departments in the states of these if they don't even have logic to start with. I don't know what people's opinion.
It's going to get worse. It's going to get worse.
It's going to get worse.
I'm going to give an unpopular opinion. So I think the window of opportunity is now passed.
For math,
It started in the 80s and through the 90s, and we've lost it. And what CS departments really want now is proper teaching of statistics.
But
Not a logic.
Okay, fair enough. So, but what are we doing then? We could just go home.
Yeah.
But I think, really, what's happening here, Tim Gower's formal proof, that should revive the interest of mathematicians in this technology.
But you see a clear disconnect between what's going on in Europe and what's going on in the United States.
I wouldn't. So, for example, at our universities, it's also like the CS students get logic, whereas the math students, well, not so much, basically, right? But I think we are here to change it, basically.
I think it's not going to help us to wring our hands and sort of moan about how mathematics doesn't appreciate us magicians enough.
Oh, I'm not.
No, I'm not saying that you are, but I'm saying that I think what we need to do is try to get it back in. And so so in small, we should hope that a discrete mathematics course or an introductory proof on the concepts of mathematics should have some logic, right? And so that's something that we encourage by having materials and so on. And I think in such a course, if I have a few minutes at the end, I'll talk about our experiences. You can start using formal methods. So I think we want to try to. So I think you have to start at the bottom. You have to start with incoming students. And I think we have to make a case, right, in mathematics, which is the one I care about. I think we really have to make the case that logic has something to add and that it can't be done and that it's useful.
So about the formal methods course, I really teach it, with focus on software engineering because this is what it is, and starting from the observation that there is this myth in the field that formal methods are hard, that doing logic and writing specs formally is difficult, which I don't agree with, and I've tried to sort of expose as a myth, but in practice by actually teaching the course. I don't think that writing specs and reasoning formally about programs is a lot more difficult than actually writing good programs. The level of formality of programs is, if anything, higher, right? Because if you don't write something precisely formal, the computer is not going to run it. It's just different focus on operational, whether, as opposed to declarative expressions of the same information. But even that is getting blurred now by languages that are more and more declarative, right? So we're going higher up. If you're a proficient functional programmer, you're writing specs, in a sense, executable specs. And I try to make this point to my students, and in fact, I teach formal methods at 3 levels. At the levels of high-level specification, you just want to build models, formal models of the system you're going to develop. At the level of what we could call executable specifications, you write executable models, so something that it's down in the abstraction hierarchy. It's still formal, it's still declarative, but you can generate programs out of it. And then finally, at the lowest level, if you will, it's the level of writing specifications for traditional source code, that is traditional programs. And I use automated tools at all levels, again, to make the case that one is useful, just to write this specification is useful. 2, if you have a tool that helps you, if you write formal specification, then a tool, you can have the help of a tool to write the specs and realize what's wrong with it and improve it. And 3, when you get to the lower level, then you can use the specs to actually check the correctness of programs. And so I try to sell this as a way to write better programs, which in fact, that's what it is. And there's, in fact, and I'm offering like an alternative view here, more focus on writing specifications as opposed to writing proofs. Right? So Blavatsky said it's not about the theorems, it's about the proofs the other day. In this case, it's not about the proofs, it's about the theorems or the definitions. This, to some extent, I would say, is less of a problem in mathematics because as mathematicians, that's what you do most of the time, right? Formalize stuff, perhaps not in the sense of what we're in the sense for formal methods, but in the sense of writing things rigorously, concepts and property rigorously. But there is a surprising lack of skills in computer science about this. I would say in general, that is, people have a hard time writing or expressing specifications of anything. I'm not just talking about software. I'm just saying, describe a chair, the concept of a chair. People have a hard time. And computer scientists have a hard time explaining what or specifying what a program does. So going through the exercise of formalizing specifications and making sure that people understand that you need to be precise and you need to be exhaustive, I think it's extremely important. And I think my students in the end realize that. And a lot of that is achieved through the use of automated tools. When you start writing specs and you give it to the tool, and the tool starts complaining about all problems, inconsistencies, incompleteness, finding bugs, and so on, it makes a very strong case. Oh, I forgot to say this. Example, specify, so this program takes a list as input and produces the sorted version of that list. Specify that. So most students will tell you correctly that the output list is sorted, right? We'll be able to write that. But they are not able to understand that they have to make the connection with the input list, right? That in fact, all the elements come from the input list. Or they miss the fact that there are no repetitions, or you're not dropping elements. The output list is a permutation of the input. So these are all important things that I think it's easy to explain and make a case of if you're using formal methods. So in this sense, my experience has been very positive. In terms of this being hard, you can do it in a way that It's just as hard as other courses. You have to put effort. We were discussing this, and Ajay, how do you pronounce your first name? Asya was mentioning this. Yes, you could give assignments where they have to spend a lot of work, but you could also structure assignments so that you don't have to spend a lot of work. I think 10 minutes assignment is a little too little for me, but you can definitely do it in a way that, you know, they spend a congruous amount of time. You have to limit what they can prove about, you know, programs and so on. And here it's with the auxiliary of, the help of a tool, but often, especially if you're doing program about, if you're doing properties about program, we use Daphne for those who are familiar with it. You do have to put a lot of effort in coming up with this right lemmas and intermediate results. In that case, it will be, for instance, loop invariance. So there is a proof process going on, although it's not a proof in the sense of Isabel. It's still interactive in that sense. So you can't give them programs that are too complex or properties of programs that are too complex, but it's possible. And my experience in the end is that you get the whole spectrum, like in all other CS courses. You get students that really get it, they're really good at it, and you know they'll do fantastic work, like you get. There's students that just have to be there because it's one of the courses in the software engineering tracks, for instance, and they'll do enough. There's students that will never get it. They just don't know how to write formal stuff. But these are the same students that also write very crappy programs. So you know there's not a lot of difference in that sense. One challenge, and no one has mentioned this, and I'm surprised, that we have when we teach this thing is to show to a general audience, not a self-selected audience of the summer school, that this stuff is relevant. So for computer scientists, I spent a lot of effort in explaining, you want to learn this stuff. It's going to be helpful. You know, why do I need? I mean, students are at the point where they're asking, why do I need to learn a new programming language? Why can't I just stick to the programming language I have? And if now you're even teaching them, in addition to a new programming language, you're teaching them something, these tools, logic and so on, they really question the usefulness. I get actual questions of where is this going to be useful? Why do I need it? Am I going to get a job with this? Is this going to help me? And so there's a lot of education also in that aspect, not just the going through the explanation of the tool, the formalism, and the logic. And I think it's important to realize that, and to be successful, you have to cover the whole spectrum. Some students you're not going to reach. There's also students that's just, this is completely pointless. I'd rather be taking another class, and I'm here just because I have to. But I guess that's.
But they're
that's
already
always
there.
the
You don't
case.
need to convince them, right?
It's a course that you need to take for the track. Well, it's a software engineering course. So these students have to be there, right? They have to take it. So, but in a sense, it's good, right? Because if you only teach courses that are optional, you're always going to get a view that is a bit skewed, right? Whereas if you teach a mandatory course, you'll get also some, a varied audience.
While you're talking, I'm just going to set up.
So can you indicate where they get their initial bias from and whether they change their minds from the beginning to the end?
It's interesting. I don't know. I think it really is the lack of exposure to logic to start with, to formal languages. Because writing specs, writing formulas, definitions, properties is hard when you've never done it.
I'm reminded of, I think it was Peter Searle perhaps in the discussion in the workshop, was talking about the C Standards Committee and their interaction with it. And one thing he said was, don't ever mention a quantifier.
Yeah, it's exactly
right.
right.
And that's sort of, it's true.
Or Greek letters, for that matter.
Well, yeah.
But but it's not hopeless. You can change it if you do it. So I teach Alloy to start with. So Alloy is a great language. It's totally textual. You have a tool that gives you immediate feedback. You're teaching them logic. I don't start with semantics. I don't start with semantics for sort of logic. I start with concrete examples. Now the fact that Alloy has a relational logic in it, it's helpful because a lot of students have some familiarity with databases, so they understand the notion of a relation, of tuples, of projections and joins. And then you just introduce naturally quantifiers, And that normally it actually worked, somebody's, you mentioned that Perry used to teach Z and it was a disaster. I think, or it wasn't that good. I think it was also a function of the fact that he was using this formalism that people, found intimidating, whereas Alloy looks like a programming language, and it's really, Z on steroids. So I've been quite successful in introducing these concepts in a smoother way using Alloy, and then moving to other languages later.
So they change their minds from beginning to end, to the end of the course?
It's hard to say if they change your mind, because I've actually, I should have done this, questionnaires where I specifically asked this question. But you do know about the attitude of some people, and you see that towards the end, it's a different attitude. I mean, you perceive it initially.
I'm mindful of the fact that we said that the session would end at 5 o'clock. If I could go maybe 5 minutes over and just spend a few minutes telling you about the course that three of us have taught.
Yes.
And then we'll take a break, and then we'd be happy to stick around and talk about it for longer. But I don't, if you've been sitting here for a long time, so let me just do that quickly, and anybody who leaves, wants to leave.
Well, since it was my fault, please use all the time you need.
So, for the last couple of years, so Robin Flores and I have taught an undergraduate introduction to Logic and Proof, where we've made use of Lean. And the goal of the course, there were explicitly threefold goals, right? The goal is to teach students, first and primarily and most importantly, to read and write ordinary mathematical proofs. So it's really primarily an introduction to mathematical reasoning and mathematical argumentation. But in addition, we tell students we're going to teach them how to use symbolic logic at the basic level, propositional logic, natural deduction, proof trees, proof assignments, and so on, and first order logic, and so on. And then finally, we use for exercise, we use Lean as sort of another component of the course. So along the way, they're also using to use the language of an interactive the prover itself. And in a moment, I'll show you where to find it online, and you can find the table and contents and so on. But as far as teaching mathematics, it's just straightforward introduction to mathematical proofs, so sets, functions, relations, all the usual things, how to do proof by induction, a little bit of combinatorics and probability, defining real numbers as Cauchy sequences, and how to say convergence, and so on. And the last week, we just talked about the axioms of set theory. So it's really just a really traditional introduction to mathematical proof. As far as the logic we do, again, it's totally routine. It's propositional logic. So it's what I said before. And then along the way, we use Lean alongside. So when we're doing logic, we have them do proofs in propositional logic, proofs in propositional identities, first order identities, a little bit of set theory. Have them prove formally that A intersect B union C is equal to A intersect B union A intersect C, or that the composition of surjective functions is surjective, and so on. And so if you look at each one, the course, it's about as routine and boring as and uninnovative a course on introduction to mathematics as you can imagine. Same for logic. And if you were teaching somebody who's an interactive prover, that's exactly what you would do. What makes the course brilliant and innovative and novel and really remarkable is that we do all three at the same time in parallel and work them together and make them fit. So again, it's not any one treatment, right? That's interesting. It's the fact that we do it all at once.
So can you indicate what the sequence is?
Yeah, so I'll show you the table of contents in a moment. And let me just a moment. So before I show you the table of contents, here are some things that we observed about ways to go about doing it. So first of all, when we first lecture, we really emphasize the fact that we're doing three different things. There's math, there's symbolic logic, there's Lean. They're three different things. Right? So don't ever pretend that they're the same. You can say this is how we do mathematics informally. If you want to do it in Lean, here's how we model it. Symbolic logic. You can talk about what each language is good for, why, how they differ, and once you do that, students make the context switch. They know when they're doing a natural deduction proof and what they're supposed to do, and they know when they're giving a mathematical proof what they're supposed to do. But then you can also talk about the relationships between them, right? I mean, they can see, how you would write, how you prove things formally. And when you give an informal proof, you can look at the informal proof and you can say, what's going on there? And they'll say, oh, well, that's just oral elimination, and that's just, an and introduction, right? So they can see the informal proof in formal terms, they can connect it to that, but they can still write the informal proofs. And again, we logicians like to believe that this really helps them, right? Understanding the logical structure helps them understand and write proofs. I don't know if there's really any hard data for that, but at least it doesn't hurt, right? And they seem to enjoy it. So they commented favorably. They seem to like it.
So where do the students come from and where do they go?
Yeah. So So this was a course. It was intended as a first-year course at Carnegie Mellon. So the original intent is somewhat a failed intent. In that, so in the computer science department, there is every incoming student is required to take a concepts of mathematics course. And over the years, the CS department has had a hard time because students, they hate it, they complain about it. Some teachers are good, some are not as good. And so the initial thought of this was to have an optional replacement. So in other words, instead of taking that, they can take this. The argument would be that in this, they do a little bit more logic, and there's this formal component that isn't the other one. So something has to give. They do a little bit. The mathematical content gets cut down a little bit. But on the other hand, they're using formal methods and symbolic methods, and that would be helpful to them. So that was the original case. It turns out for pragmatic and political reasons, it won't. So that won't happen. But we're just still talking about possibilities of working it into the CS curriculum. But basically, it gets cool. So my home department is philosophy, so it's formally in a philosophy department. But we've got students from philosophy, mathematics, and computer science. And the hope is that if we keep doing it, we'll get that mix. And it's supposed to be at the introductory level, so students coming in without a lot of background.
Have you been able to get some feedback? Like, how often have you done this now?
I've taught variations on this course for a number of years without a formal component at all. A couple of times I did it using Isabel, and then just twice using me. So,
I'm wondering if the students report back after a year, 2 years, and so on.
So we haven't. So let's see. I did a long time ago. I did it with Isabel, and it's just last couple of years I came back to this course, and so I haven't tracked the students. I do know that a bunch of students who took this course then went on to take a course in interactive and automated improvement, so a much more advanced course. So there were some really strong students from computer science, and they uniformly really liked it and wanted to do more. So the last thing I'll do before breaking and then you go, and again I'll be happy to stick around and talk about it some more. Is let me just show you the course. So it's built with the tutorial. So you can find it from the Lean page. It's there, and so all the chapters are here. It's running with Lean 2, the older version of Lean. So, so one of the things that I have to do by the end of the summer is update it. So Rob Flores and I have to update it and so on. But at the end there's sort of exercises, and then you can also see a PDF version here. And so Shanker, just answer to the question of tables of contents. So in the beginning, it's more logic heavy. So Lean is sort of an add-on for most of the way through the course, but in the beginning, it's more logic heavy. So we do propositional logic and natural deduction and so on, and then you do it in Lean. And then classical semantics of propositional logic. Then we do first-order logic, and then then do it in Lean and talk about informally the notion of a model, like how sentences can be true or false in a model. And then we just start doing the sets, functions, and relations, or sets, relations, and functions thing. And here we do informal mathematics, and then we do some little bits of it in Lean. And so in each chapter, if you look at the exercises, there are or just the kinds of routine things you would see in an introductory mathematical class, as exercises. And then in Lean, we try to pick like the easier ones, the ones that they can formalize in Lean without too short proofs, not too very long. So in some cases, we'll set up all the definitions for them and say, fill in this fact and so on. So you have to be realistic. We didn't want to make this a course about Lean. We wanted to make it a course where Lean could help them better understand the mathematical material. And so to do that, we tried to make the exercises in lean, fairly, limited and manageable. But every homework assignment, they would be, they would do informal proofs, or they would do some logic and so on, and then they would do some exercises. So, we've got we still have a lot of work to do on it, but it's coming along. So we did natural numbers and induction, then a little bit of number theory, so just prime numbers and arithmetic and so on. And by the end, we basically ran out of what was in the library and lean and what we could reasonably do. So hopefully we'll, the intent is to keep going with material and keep filling in stuff. But by the time we got to combinatorics and the real numbers, that we were doing only informally, so this past time. But hopefully we'll get there. And at the end, a little bit about the infinite. And we do have some material on set theory that yeah, Rob.
Can I just say a little bit about the organization? So I guess the first time you taught the course, when I wasn't in the classroom, we had the text arranged so that the three components were all sort of together in the chapters for the most part. There was discussion of lean in the same chapters, informal discussion. And from what I understood, that got a little confusing.
It was just kind of messy. It was too, so I think one thing, I should have mentioned, by the way, so the 2 years ago, I taught it, and Flores was my TA. And then last year, Rob and I were co-instructors, so we taught it together. We alternated lectures, more or less. But yeah, so in an earlier version, the first draft of this, we would really jumble everything up in the same chapter. And it just got to be too much kind of jumping around. And so I thought it just was cleaner to say, okay, let's talk about functions, as we would in ordinary mathematics. Then you finish that topic, and then you talk about how you formalize it and how you represent it.
How many hours?
Say what?
How many hours?
Oh, it's 3 hours a week. Met for 3 hours a week, about 14 weeks in the semester.
Yeah. It amounted to a day or two on the informal part of the topic and a day in the lean part of the topic, roughly.
Yeah. It was, we wanted a good clip, but students are kind of on good. So I mean, depending on the quality of your students, you could do more of this. Okay, let's break here, and again, we'll be happy to stick with it. But yeah, do send me any references, any links, anything that I should add to the slides. Send them to me. I'm happy to do it. Thanks to Jasmine.
So I want to hear from Jacques and
So let's say, feel free to get up and go. Yeah, well, but if you want to stick up.
But
feel
why
free to
isn't
stick
this
around.
a candidate for the discrete math?
Oh, I think so to finally deal with the issue, what computer science did just last year was they hired somebody from mathematics to full-time to manage this course. And so I spoke to Frank Fenning, and he told me that at least, for next year, so they want to keep the cohort together, they're going to see. But then again, that instructor is somebody I know. And I'm going to meet with him in August and talk about ways of maybe I can come and do a guest lecture on formal methods. I've also suggested to him that in the long term, maybe one option is to let him teach the course as he ordinarily would. But I mean, by the way, the outline of the course they're teaching is sets function. I mean, it's really the same sort of stuff. And so what we could possibly do is students can take that course, but then have an option of getting sort of 3 units extra, doing an extra 1 meeting a week and doing exercises in the week or something like that. So yeah, I mean, the thought of, it was sort of exciting, the thought of trying to get computer science in on it, because they've got 150 students or so every year. So there would be a cheap way to sort of build it into a big class. So I mean, we'll still keep running this course, I think, with a smaller enrollment. But I think we're still hopeful of trying to make inroads and getting it more widely used. And the nice thing about it is, independent of how many people do it at Carnegie Mellon, we're going to make the materials available online, and so that hopefully other people can use it other places as well. So yeah, don't be shy if you want to leave, if you're tired, just hesitate. But Jacques, could you say a little bit about?
Yeah, so we have an automated reasoning course. So it's been running. We've been teaching Isabel, for instance, for 10 years or so. more than that actually. So it was a 4th year MSc course, and it used to be split in 2 parts. First part Isabel, and second part model checking actually. And so it was split and then moved to new SMV. But from last year, so I used to share this with Paul Jackson, for instance. I shared with different people. So now it's moved to 3rd year. And one of the reasons we did this is because we were not getting people doing projects in the final year for us, because by the time they had to choose their projects at the end of 3rd year, nobody would pick Isabel or anything like that because they've never done anything like this. So I moved it to 3rd year, so I'm teaching this. And one way we get mathematicians to do the course is because it's a joint, it's compulsory for anybody doing a joint degree between CS and maths and AI and maths. Okay. So it's compulsory for them. They usually actually do better than the rest. And it's quite an eye-opener for many of them, because they do a bit of logic, because they have to do that as part of their course. And then you usually, so it used to be we get them to do projects with kind of automated reasoning projects. So it works quite well. So that our template is usually just around, so it's around 16 lectures, so two hours of lectures a week. But we have 2 hours of labs a week as well with ATA and everything. And then we have 1 hour of small class as well. So it's quite a lot of hours a week in that way. And they have they only have one assignment, one big assignment, and an exam as well. So 40-60 roughly the way this is built. And it starts bottom up, so we do it with natural deduction. So they taught natural deduction, and then they taught like basic how to do it on proof trees on pen and paper, and then they move to like Isabel to do that. And then it moves pretty quickly. We also spend a fair amount of time on representation, right? Because it's like you can do these simple proofs in natural deduction and all this kind of stuff. Fairly easy to represent things in logic, but once you move to something more interesting, then it can become quite hard. But it gives us a way, at least this year, last year, to introduce like structured proof and introduce notions such as locales for things and structure in terms of looking at things.
So you talk about how you go from a natural deduction proof in your mind,
how you do that in there. So it's quite simple. So in the assignment has always been like this, and this is what we found worked. It's like it's not about them failing, it's about them learning. So it's about 40% is just natural deduction, so they can get first order and proportional. So most of them can do that if they kind of engage with the course, and this is the pass mark for the assignment. So most should be able to pass. Then it goes to around 80%, which is a bit more challenging. And then there's a 20% usually, which is very often challenging. It's really then who are those who you might want to do a project with, who might want to do something. It's really usually quite difficult actually, and it can take more time, and many have given up by then. Right, so it works in this kind of, we found through experience that works quite well in terms of nobody feels left out completely doing the natural deduction generally. Although this year I had one guy who basically couldn't do anything. Pretty rare, but it happened. And what I think they quite enjoy. What they kind of find, we tried at one point to do this kind of the way you did it, like top down. That didn't work very well. So, I think they like the bottom up, they like the fact they get a bit of logic, and one thing that we learned, so because the assignment can be detached from the rest, so I've done like whole logic kind of assignments, I've done inductive assignments, I've done formalized mathematics. The formalized mathematics one tend to go down, which is counterintuitive to some extent, usually well, and usually the one that work quite well is when they can visualize things, so kind of more axiomatic, put some axioms of geometry, then explore this in some way or another, for instance. So we've explored all possible ways of doing geometry or proving things. And so I think what I've really realized this year is what the student need is the hours, and having helpful people they can go to. We use Piazza as well, which is quite useful. I think you use Piazza, right? So then the students so they help each other as well for the course, aside from being able to have a meeting.
That's the really hard thing about formal math. The problem is, when you get stuck, what do? You know, you can't fake it, you can't get partial. If you're stuck, you're stuck.
In some school, we put them in pairs. They work in pairs. Actually, they talk to each other all the time. So,
so I think
so I think that also can make a difference. I think this year we tried a little bit to say you can talk. So it's quite open to say you can talk to each other, think about it, as long as you're not sitting with each other, doing the proof together, or formalizing the things together, but you can talk quite widely. But Piazza having a mailing list as well, so there are multiple channels. They can talk to me, the TA among themselves, and I think that does make a difference too. Yeah.
How many students typically?
So when it was a 4th year master's course, we had around 40 at home. But this year was 24 third year. And I got the feedback, because saying in some of the feedback thing I went, because we get formal feedback at the end. Only 8 students replied, but I think it was generally quite positive, which you never know with a new course, right? When you moved it, so.
Formal feedback. You mean is it proved correct?
Yeah, formal in the sense that that's right.
Are the materials available online?
Yeah, it's available I mean, some of it's basically is like a bit of like, so actually, there's nothing very fancy in a way because it tries to teach a lot of things at the same time in a way, right? I mean, part of it I used some of the slides from, I got Tobias slides, so I picked some of it. I didn't use the complete semantics thing, and some of the bits are quite, so I tried to do a bit of a mixture. There's a bit of things about rewriting, quite simple stuff as well, a little bit about unification algorithm, first order, so it's a bit of a mixed bag at the beginning especially, but then it starts building Isabel into there. So funnily enough, I think there was enough experience doing this for a half course that I knew what I needed to do. It's just now moving into third year, I just expanded it. They have more time to settle into Isabel fully. So, and what we've done is to move the model checking to a fourth year course, which I share with Paul Jackson, which is about, the first half is about model checking. I use USMV, and then the second part, there's like Spark ADA and all this kind of stuff that we do. So it's proper formal verification. So we've split it in that. And one is not, so they don't have to do automated reasoning to do the other one either. So try to get it to that kind of level. And
Send me, I won't remember, send me a link and
I'll
I'll add it to
send
the
it,
list.
no worries.
Any other comments or should we just?
Kind of interested in where mathematicians who take an undergraduate degree in mathematics, where they learn logic. I don't mean logic as a mathematical subject, but actually, you know, using it, as it were, say just classical first order logic. And I think it's probably, isn't it, the first time they do real analysis, because that's, you know, silent delta arguments. If you understand quantifiers by the time you get out, and you have some geometric intuition that helps you see.
Mathematics will typically have a little bit of propositional logic and then say what a quantifier is.
Yeah.
I mean, typically,
But I
when
don't
you're
think
doing a real
it means
analysis
much,
class,
though.
you're using natural language. You don't see any upside down A's or backwards U's.
No.
So in Vienna, we have the first 6 weeks, 8 hours a week, introduction into mathematical reasoning, where you do all these things.
Then also, the mathematicians get some initial course only.
Is that unusual? Are you typical or atypical?
Well, we are probably atypical. We introduced it because it was a persistent difficulty.
Problem, yeah, sure.
So we usually there was linear algebra and there was analysis in parallel, and so we merged the two for the first month to give some general introduction and something that is more independent and
By the way,
more practical.
I'm gonna press the stop recording button so that you can say what you really